with the crazy embroidery on it and stuff. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another episode of Official Vintage TV. Today we've got a cool episode where we're going to be going through how to price and value your vintage items. But firstly, make sure you subscribe, so hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you comment. We're going to be making more of these sort of educational videos, so yeah, let's get started. Alright, first things first, learning how to value your vintage item. I get this question asked a lot. It's one of the most popular questions. But yeah, education is a massive one. So learning between vintage, what's not vintage. Say a vintage item is 100% cotton, very durable, very good. Whereas like sort of a new age t-shirt's made out of polyester or fake polyester, which doesn't last as long and is not as durable. This t-shirt's about 30 years old or 25 years old and it's still pretty much in perfect condition. Whereas like these age tees don't really do that. So just making sure you have an education on vintage and what's not vintage. So yeah, pretty much vintage stuff lasts longer. It's better for the environment. Pretty much all better. And knowing that, education is probably the main point moving forward. So having that education behind you, gives you a lot more knowledge of what you're buying. So if you're learning about all the stuff you're getting in, say you're getting a lot of sports team tees in or Nike tees in, and you're actually learning a lot about Nike, you actually learn the value of the tees and what they're sort of worth. So education is a massive part in learning how to value your vintage item. So the next point is nostalgia. Nostalgia is probably one of the main points that I'm going to be going over. Pretty much nostalgia is stuff that you've sort of grown up with. Say with me, I grew up with a lot of cartoons, Rugrats, etc. Whereas those t-shirts are way more valuable to me than say someone else who was growing up in the mid-2000s. So you can base your nostalgia off pretty much what you're seeing when you're growing up. Say that could be a sports team, basketball team, like The Last Dance came out. So you might be Chicago Bulls fan, which would be huge. You got a lot of nostalgia for that. But yeah, pretty much nostalgia is not really based off your price. So like if I price a Rugrats tee at about $500, it might not sell, but it might be worth $500 to me, but no, it might not actually be worth $500 on the market. So you got to keep that in mind when you're putting stuff online. What could be valuable to you might not be valuable to me. And also on the flip side to that, if there's a group of big enough people that are into that sort of stuff, say a lot of people like a certain type of Nike tee, there's a market for it where it could be increasing as well. It's like the stock market. I say it all the time. Vintage is like the stock market. It's like shoes. There's prices that go up, things that are trending, all that sort of stuff. But make sure when you're pricing it, don't just primarily base it off nostalgia. Alright, moving on to the third point, which is probably the main point of the lot. This is tags, like what size it is, quality of the item, and the shape of the item as well. So we're going to move on to the first thing, which is the tags. So you're going to make sure it's going to be vintage. So most vintage have the material tags. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of tag guides in the next few videos. So make sure you're keeping subscribed for that one. Moving on to the size, say an XL. An XL is probably our main seller. XL and large are completely different to small and medium. Just because they're more popular, everyone likes wearing oversized tees, so everyone likes wearing large and XL, which is going to make those a lot more popular and a lot more valuable. So the large and XLs are going to be a lot more valuable than small and medium. It's also decided on the shape of the tee. We could have a narrow tee, which people don't really like narrow tees, so it's going to be less of a value to say a boxier tee. Also the quality. Say if you got all rips on the neck of the tee or the arms of the tee, it's going to decrease the value as well. Even though it's a vintage tee, people don't really like the wear and tear on a lot of them, or even if there's big holes, it definitely decreases the value for most people. Say for me, I like a bit of rip, I like a bit of wear as well, so that I don't really care about that when I'm buying a tee. But for the majority, people like a good quality vintage item. Also for the tags, it's depending on what type of tag as well, can increase the value. So say if you got a rock tee a lot of the main rock tees are on the Brockham tag. So if you've got a Brockham tag rock tee, that's going to be a lot more valuable than, say, a Gildan tag rock tee. So you make sure you know your tags, know what type of tag it is. So for sports team, there's a group of tags that they use, a group of manufacturers. Same as for rock tees, same as for Nike tees. They got a whole tag list, and that just is going back to the education that we were talking about in point one. So make sure you educate yourself about all those tags, because then you actually get a knowledge of what you're selling, how much it's actually worth, and like educating yourself about this vintage game. So fourth point is supply and demand and keeping up with trends. These are two other sort of brief points. So keeping up with the trends. Say you see a celeb wearing a Grateful Dead tee. This is what actually happened. So A$AP Rocky wore a Grateful Dead tee, and then Grateful Dead started popping. So everyone started following that Grateful Dead tee trend. But just stuff like that. So celebrities wear something, like Justin Bieber, Kanye wear a vintage tee, like Harleys go up, they start spiking because of this trend that influencer has had. Supply and demand as well. So say we have a whole bunch of champion sweaters that can supply a lot of people. That's how trends sort of start. So say sports team's trending at the moment, there's a lot of sports team, but now we're moving into the sort of Nike stuff. You had a rock tee and there was only one tour of that, so the supply and demand's very small. So that's going to make that tee a lot more popular. So say if we got a Pink Floyd tee like this, there wasn't too many of these made. This wasn't a tour one, but there wasn't this many of these tees made, so it's really hard to find on eBay and that sort of stuff. Yeah, so say for that certain tee, there's a massive demand for it, but there's not a lot of them around. But the supply and demand is very hard for that certainty. So pretty much the next point is ask yourself these questions when you're determining the value of your vintage items. The first one is, so how rare is the item compared to it not being so rare? So I was talking about it before, there's a whole bunch of rock tees. They're only built for that tour, so there's only a certain amount made in circulation. Whereas say we go to the other end where there's the Nike tees, so we just got a normal swoosh, those are basics, those are very stable at a stable price. But say a Nike swoosh in the middle tick, say for a hoodie, they've increased in value because of trends, like we were saying in the other point. Travis Scott was wearing it, he was wearing a cream colored one, and then it started increasing the value, and I think they go for around $1,000 now. But yeah, how rare is your item? Pretty much. So the next question you should ask yourself is, how long did it take to find the item, and how common is the item? So how long it takes you to find it. Say you're looking for this item online for about 3 years. Obviously that item is a lot more valuable because it's harder to come by compared to something that was sort of mass produced back in the 90s. Say a lot of tourist tees were mass produced. Say Alaska, LA sort of touristy tees. They were mass produced, and they're a lot less valuable because they're so much easier to find. So the next question you should ask yourself when you're trying to value your vintage item is, how popular was it in the 90s? So let's go back to the 90s, where hip hop was on the rise. Rap tees are a lot more expensive. They had some of the best rock and roll. So people loved sport back then. People love sport now. That was a lot popular in the 90s. But yeah, you just got to ask yourself, how popular was this in the 90s? And am I able to sell it? So the next point is talking about websites and apps. So this is if you're really struggling how to find the price for your item or the value for your item. So I got this one for example. I got this Adidas crew neck. As an example, say I'd be looking for, if I were to try to find this sweater, it's obviously got the Olympic rings there, so it's an Olympic sweater. It's got the Adidas on there, so I'll be looking for an Adidas hit. It's got this Winter Games hit, 1980s, and it's got this back hit on there as well with the dates. But I could easily go onto eBay. I could just search up, to make it sort of brief, I'd just be like Adidas Olympic sweater. I'd be like Winter Games 1980s, and it should pop up. Or if it doesn't, you can look at the sold history of it. This is sort of a more common one, a more common Adidas sweater, so it'll definitely show up. But say if you were looking for a tee like this, or a Guns N' Roses tee where it's a lot harder to come by, you make sure you look at the sold history on it, and then you can get an idea of how much they've been selling for. But yeah, that's just gives you an idea. But say if you had a rock tee like this, probably easier way, this is on a Brockham tag, you'll say, oh, Brockham tag, Guns N' Roses, tour tee, I think this is Use Your Illusion, tour 91 to 92, and then it's got the dates on here of where it was, so this would be American tour. You just type that in, so you'd be like, Guns N' Roses, American tour, 1991, 1992. And you can suss the history of the item and what it's sold for in the past. You can also use other websites. Say it's probably best to use vintage stores in your country. So because we're in Australia here, we're completely different prices to say you're in America or you're in New Zealand. So make sure you stay to your stores in your country and get a grip on sort of the price. Say we're still looking for this Adidas sweater, we'll try search this in the search bar of any of their websites, be like Adidas sweater, and see if they've got any alike or if they've sold any like that. But yeah, just going onto their websites, getting a price comparison of what it's valued at, because you might get a website that's super high, you might get a website that's super cheap, but you also might get the website that's probably in the middle ground of both, where you'd probably want to be pricing that item most likely. But that's another good way to value your vintage items, and it's an easier way as well. It just takes a little bit of research. Yeah, and also if you're really struggling, we get a whole bunch of DMs during the week being like, oh, how much does this t-shirt cost, and get a value for it. People are always happy to help, especially in the vintage community. They love helping newbies out. That's why we love this community. But yeah, if you're really in struggle to find a price, just reach out. People are always willing to help. Send us a DM. We're also willing to help. But yeah, those are probably the main points when you're trying to value your vintage items. So I hope you guys liked this episode. Hope you got a whole bunch of value. I highly recommend you go educate yourself on vintage and vintage items before you go ask anyone, because it would be a lot better for you when you're trying to value your vintage items in the future, because you start picking up on little cues like tags, sizing, that sort of stuff that we've covered all through this video. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. But thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next episode.